been a long time actually since I had to attack my car.
I don't even want to talk about it. Ooh. I think about that often because I've done 4 of them. And, you know,
It's been a long time for me.
yeah, it's been a long time.
This one just like literally jumped off of the bank from behind a piece of brush and was in my lane, and I was like,
I had one do that on the way over the loop, and it jumped right in the lane, and I was going, this is it, and then he jumped right back out.
well, it was such a close bank, there was not, I couldn't get this way, I was trying to get out of the way the other way, and he was running across the road as I was moving, so.
You could do that with your little car, did you?
I did.
Did we have to airlift it?
No, no, I was surprised because I was not I'd come around a corner and I wasn't going real fast, but, you know, slamming on the brakes and getting over, and it took his legs out, and it just sat him down right on the hood, and then I got stopped, and he rolled around and then ran off.
Oh, okay.
He goes, we just went, that's just a little car.
Yeah. When I got out and looked right here just at lunch, and it just seems like, I was surprised that no plastic broke or anything, it was just the hood is just
Oh,
going down.
I would have thought you'd have to
I know.
pick yours up with a dustpan.
That's that's about it, too.
Throw it back into a pickup going by.
Another 5 miles an hour, and I might have.
So you just hit that cone.
I was loaded with a load of logs going down through that, on the other side of Wakanda, the first dip development in Furr Mountain. Big old 4-point rock jumped out, slammed on the brakes, and scrambled out of the way, and the next thing it was the highway right behind me.
Oh, really?
On the throttle, trying to get it, hit the cab. Opportunity, you know. Okay. So much for fun and games. It's 1:30. And welcome.
Thank you, sir. I'm Chris Furr, District Ranger.
Good. Glad to meet you.
Yes, sir. Nice to meet you.
Well, the purpose of our gathering here today is to, one, meet you. And, I mean, the commissioners always subjects of interest, in both districts, but certainly out of the Methow. And, some discussion on your part in terms of, okay, now you're here, now what? You know, so what test, what kind of things would you like to see done? What kind of relationship would you like to garner with the commissioners, where we generally communicate back and forth, sometimes through me, sometimes not. By the way, I'm Perry Houston. Start with the basic information. I'm the Director of Planning and Community Development here for the county. So kind of a freewheeling discussion is what we have in mind. The commissioners do have certain expectations in terms of the coordination requirements of the Forest Service, which I would report out has actually been pretty successful in recent history. So, you know, we're on a good starting point. So with that, take it away, Chris.
So yeah, just really want to say thanks for the invitation. Andy and I have had an opportunity to kind of get a fast start on a working relationship this summer, and also had a great experience working with Mo here to get things started off. And so I'm really looking forward to this relationship. I'm really happy to be here in Okanogan County and in the Methow. It really, I hesitate to say too much about myself because it was in, I don't know, in the paper and all that kind of good stuff, but I grew up back east in the South, and my dad is a logger, and we grew up with cattle, and so this is a place that really suits my interest. And then personally, we like to get out and spend time recreating on the forest, and so just a lot of good reasons for us to be here, for my wife and I to be here and be here professionally, and this is a really good opportunity. So I just say, as far as communication, if you all have had something that works good in the past and come in regular meetings, I'm happy to do whatever works well. I just want to make sure you're getting the information that you need, and I'm pretty easy to reach. I don't ever get out of reach out of one of these black boxes, and so but you can always call me, send me an email. if there's something that you feel like you're not getting from us, but be happy to come in and sit down with you regularly and talk and look forward to that.
So in particular, where'd you come from?
So my last 7 years have been in Taos, New Mexico, in northern New Mexico.
Okay.
Before that, I was in Arkansas for 6-7 years in the Ozarks, worked in East Texas and then in other places in the Southeast. I grew up in Mississippi, but haven't worked for the Forest Service there.
I see, okay.
20-year employee.
I thought it was nice because it was like 6:30 in the evening or something like that, and I get this call from this phone, and I'm like, "Hey, who's this?" And I answer the phone, and it's Chris, and he says, "Hey, my name's Chris Furr. I'm the new district ranger up here. Just wanted to call and let you know there's some things going on and stuff like that." So it was nice to just get a call from, a person who's new and introduce himself.
Yeah, great.
So what do we, there's one thing that's going on that was brought to my attention. So we have the comment period, the objection period for the outfitters and guides. I guess that hearing was set the day before hunting season.
Yeah, and I did touch base with the forest on that. When those objections go up one level higher, that's set out of the regional office there in Portland, and so I'm not certain what. I think there's a resolution meeting set for the October 11th, I believe. But yeah, Brian did voice some concerns over that I shared.
Yeah, it would be nice to try to get that moved because obviously that's probably the busiest day of the year for those guys when they're taking photos.
Couple projects, just like, let us know where
Sure.
they are, Twisp River.
Sure. So right now, our focus has been on fire line repair and the burned area emergency response, BEAR. BEAR is moving towards wrapping up, and our fire line repair will be mostly just road graders from here on out. We only have a little bit left that's gonna be more than that. So the next sort of string of things that we have to do, we have the Mount Hull over here on Tenasket. We have salvage opportunities to evaluate and see what there might be. And then we have to take another look at Mission. And unfortunately, some of the same people that have been integral to these projects with the fire are gonna be integral there. And so kind of having to, the transition into getting a closer look at Mission, a closer look at salvage. We've been doing some recon and looking in between the two fires. Got about 100 acres so far on McLeod that has been identified as having potential. And so now it's a matter of taking some industry folks out there to see, if there's gonna be enough interest to go forward there.
I don't know how much experience you have in fire, but I'm gonna just jump on the bandwagon here. As you Smokejumper base for your district, we've been in a big paper. Basically, we've got a lot of momentum in saving the Smokejumper base. They were trying to take it away from us. And I was a Smokejumper. So that's one of my main priorities is to make sure that Smokejumper base stays there. I'd like to find a way to get it granted in perpetuity in the Methow, but I don't know. That's at a congressional level probably to do that. But anyway, just so you know where I'm coming from, that's near and dear to my heart. So I would hope that you would join us in that battle to keep it here.
And I can give you a little bit of information. Some of my folks have been involved in some discussions. There is some money for planning you know, some upgrades there. We've been in discussion, you know, they work for the forest, level, just structure-wise. But we, the district, have been involved in trying to see if it makes sense to co-locate fire, and our fire folks out there with them. And so as they go through the designs of the upgrade and what that would look like, you know, that's where the district has been engaged. And from what I understand, funding to actually do these upgrades would be tied to that 2020 omnibus bill where the fire fix was part of that.
So they're thinking about you're looking into the ground fire out there too?
Yeah, you know, we have space issues, particularly with our Type 3 engine and not having really a good place to store that. And so, so offices and just space for our fire organization, yeah, some of that would really make sense, so.
That'd be good.
Um,
So as you progress on evaluating the fire damage and potential for salvage, I would invite you to come to the Forest Collaborative and have some discussions there, so maybe we can head off any problems we might run into in terms of you getting that done.
Okay.
what is so the Twisp River, project was gonna be the next project in the district, correct? And that burned, right?
Yeah, but you know, what we're really finding is a really mixed severity on these two fires. And, you know, I know I had in my mind from that plume dominated day on Crescent that everything from Poplar Bluff to the roads in there, I really expected that to be high severity, and it isn't. You know, that the headwaters up there around Gilbert, you know, and that whole side of the mountain went. And then it made a run, but the run kind of stayed up on top of the ridge, and a lot of the fire that came down into the river corridor back down. And so we still have a viable project with Twisp. It'll just be a matter of how the timeline is affected. And there may be some of those, you know, trees that we're gonna lose, but not immediately, that wouldn't be eligible for salvage, but what we may be able to include some of that sort of thing into the analysis.
Just for an update for you, we had the US Fish and Wildlife folks in here, 2 weeks ago? I think something like 2 weeks ago, talking about wolves and, you know, the issues that we could have and just trying to educate the public. And so, you know, the Forest Service is a part of that because, you know, those type of things. So I don't know if they're engaging with you at all yet, or if that's.
No, you know, I haven't really, you know, I know that you all were involved in the discussions there with the incident there in Tenasket, but I haven't really been, other than just reading along, sort of engaged there with Fish and Wildlife yet.
Okay. So, you know, as they start getting, I know they've been engaged pretty well with the Tenasket Ranger District, but I think that's something we'll try to get in touch with them, make sure that.
Say, Matt Reedy was the one who brought up that they were working on an
Right.
informational pamphlet, essentially, that, for, I assume for distribution, trailheads, campgrounds, that sort of thing. What to look for with the wolves or something along those lines. We haven't seen that yet, correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So we're still waiting for that to come out.
Okay.
Another thing that's important to us is our range permits. You know, keeping, I mean, you obviously, you said you grew up in cattle and stuff like that, that's important to just keep the multi-use, you know, and multi-use does include, you know, range permits.
Yeah, and you know, these partnerships are really important to me, and I say partnerships because it is a little bit different here, whether you've got a range permit or the permit for skiing at the loop, or you know, our outfitter and guides, whatever it might be. You know, that's that's a relationship that's really important to me, and a big part of is making sure we're good partners there and doing what we can. One thing that has really struck me on, I was able to get into the Satan for about 4 days toward the end of this fire, and the challenge that we have on these wilderness trails and working with our outfitter and guides. Really, I think we've got a pretty good model set up with Trails Collaborative, but trying to get everybody to the table there and really help us problem solve on what it's gonna take to keep those routes open into the future. So that was a good thing to just get a small glimpse into.
Where were you, where'd you go?
Went to Spanish camp, and then from there did day rides in both two directions there before we came out. So
So you got
Pretty
to
country.
got to ride all the way up through the Farewell Fire and
Oh.
up Andrews Creek.
Did you see the fact that there's so many trails that are listed out there on the maps and you can't get on?
Yep. And we're really struggling. A lot of the folks almost all our folks in trail are funded exclusively through grants. And it's just one of those things, like I say, we're gonna have to have buy-in with everybody who's part of those user groups to keep them. And, cause we're doing a lot with not a lot. But I think there's some things that we can do to better communicate what has been worked on, and I know we occasionally have some frustration that comes up about, we thought this trail was maintained, and here, get out there, and it wasn't, and some of that sort of thing. So a little bit more of a communication issue, but I'm really hoping to sit down with the outfitters after hunting season and talk through that a little bit.
You, as the district ranger, have the authority to let them use power saws for trail maintenance?
Well, there's a process where we go through requesting authority. I have authority in emergencies, but but if we're gonna be deliberate about using that, it's a process, and we'd probably wanna be pretty specific about where and when, and I do think it is one potential tool in the toolbox, particularly just because we're continuing to impact more and more and further down the road with more fire. That that's one thing, again, when I talk about having the collaborative help us solve some of these problems to sort of try and catch up. That'd be one of the things that we would be talking about for sure.
Yeah, well, it would facilitate a lot of these volunteer organizations and just individuals, to go in and clear out some of those trails that, one of my favorite places was, used to be Peep Site. I don't expect that you know where that is, but you go up the Anders Creek Trail at 10 miles and then jump over the hill. But that trail was not cut out for a long, long time, and we used to go in there and work on it ourselves just because we rode in there and fish. But I know backcountry horsemen, a lot of these packers and stuff had that ability. You'd find out that you get a lot of work done in opening up those trails.
Well, and a lot of this for me too is just, I don't know how well we have displayed the scope of the problem, and, but it really, you put it on a map and visually display how many miles and what we're trying to do. Again, I'm looking forward to working with our partners on that.
Have you talked to the new regional forester?
I've heard him speak. I've heard Glenn Casamas's, but I haven't. My forest supervisor has a meeting with him coming up, and Mike's going to be at the RO this week, and but heard good things.
Good. Yeah, we actually sent a letter to him also for the same thing we're doing here, kind of on a bigger scale. So there's, we've been going through this ATV process, the county has, and here, it's a lot different, cause you have a lot more, county roads, you know, that are longer, I guess, you know, longer county roads and things like that. Over in the Methow, you got, they're pretty, 35-mile-an-hour roads are pretty short, and then they're right into the forest. So, the travel management plan, you know, for us to understand what the, you know, any travel routes that they're gonna let WATVs travel on, that's gonna be really important for us to know, going into this last, well, not last yet, but into the last, piece over there, and kind of, you know, being able to understand, okay, if you open up this road, can you actually get into there? So that's part of the, you know, when the regional forester comes up, is to talk about that and try to figure out, okay, you know, your plan impacts our plan. So what are we gonna see for, when are we gonna see the results, or are we gonna have any more, you know, communication on that? What's gonna be the process?
Yeah, and I don't wanna play my new guy card, but I have not been able to dig in yet on travel management, other than, you know, it is the forest priority, but I don't have any sort of timelines yet on when when they anticipate completing it.
I was gonna say, you could play the I've been on a
Right.
fire guy
Yeah.
card.
Well, that's what I mean, well, that too, right? Yeah.
I went to a meeting in Cleellum last Tuesday, and that was on the travel management, but it was a collaborative meeting between the ORVA TV, UTV, WATV, whatever you wanna call any of them. But there was a great representation from across the state on that, and we got into some in-depth discussion, you know, and one of the hang-ups that they always have is, well, you know, we can't go out and designate these roads as ATV, WATV friendly or designated, or whatever term you wanna use, because, you know, we don't have the engineer to go out and so, to me, that's kind of a excuse, you know, that's what they're really hiding behind, because they have a lot of pressure from other groups that just absolutely don't want them out there. But it was interesting, the amount of, and cross-section of different users that came to that meeting. And I just threw it out there, I said, you know, as far as in the travel management plan, Forest Service roads have 3-digit and 4-digit designations. System roads are 4-digit designations, and spur roads are 3-digit designations. So I just threw it up. I said, hey guys, you know, these system roads, the 4-digit roads, are nearly identical to a county road. They've been engineered, and they have already gone through the process. They just haven't done it for WATV. So why can't you have a categorical exclusion for system roads? And that would be a basis and a start. And then you can go from there, you know, putting loops together and designated routes together. So I just threw that out so that if you hear anything about that, you'll know.
Thank you for that.
What the discussion was.
What, if anything, what do you hear about the progress of the forest management plan? A number of years ago, that actually got through scoping, and they identified I think there were 7 significant issues they were writing the DEIS around, and what we talked to, what was his name, Jason?
Okay.
Goodness, 3 years ago, give or take, or 4. And they were kind of backing away from that, the idea of getting a fresher start. That's really about at least last I've heard about it. You may, through your connections.
I met the new, well, Andy has, but I met the new deputy chief at this WATV meeting, Eric Walker.
Yeah, Eric's the deputy forest chief.
Yeah.
And I don't, and again, you know, I've been pretty much, I've have had my head down here. I'll have another meeting with the FLT next week and start to get more of an idea of what's going on outside of the Methow. My focus has been pretty fire-centric.
Sure. We had a good, we had a good working relationship with Mike Liu. He would, he came in and he would, give updates on, regular updates, and then he'd come in and, he'd go over, the last thing we went over was that mission project and just the alternatives within that, and what did we feel were, good alternatives. And that's kind of a lot of people don't realize, the money generated, part of it goes to the county, these timber sales and through the SRS funding, it's kind of been this deal where it's got untied from actual timber dollars to basically just an allocation of money. And so instead of actually generating revenue, you think about this, we think about this fire that went on up here. It not only didn't generate revenue from the timber sales, but it cost us money in fighting fire in there. So I mean, that's a double whammy.
No, it's a good reason to talk about the, I think particularly, a lot of my experience prior to coming here was working in these similar dry systems with pine and Doug Furr forests, and how effective trying to build resilience and doing restoration treatments in those can be. And so we have a lot of good work going on. I've gotten to see a few things. Lost Driveway, some other big projects where we've done a lot of thinning and fuel treatments, but we have a lot of opportunity. And one thing that was different for me there was it wasn't just counting on Forest Service appropriated dollars. We had partners bring in money to do those treatments on the ground to the table, and we got a lot more work done because of that. And that's something, again, meeting with the collaborative, and I'm really interested in looking for solutions there. Because obviously we've had 80,000 acres of fire this year. We have to be treating on a significant scale to make a difference when the fire's at that scale. So.
Yeah, we had a phone meeting this morning about a proposal for a 10-year stewardship project. I don't know if it really got anywhere, but there was a lot of good discussion.
Who was that with?
That was with Regions in Portland and the collaborative.
Yeah.
So
About the Nature
all the
Conservancy
Yeah.
proposal?
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually a forest collaborative proposal with the Nature Conservancy, drew the pieces of it together. But just trying to figure out what that would look like. But the proposal actually has up to 500,000 acre number on it. And I heard a little bit of conversation about possibly reducing that, starting out a little smaller. And that was one suggestion. And maybe working on a good neighbor agreement type that the tribes would be involved in the state. Those were suggestions being thrown out there. So, but Mike Williams did convey to the group that this forest needs help, and so we'll see how far we go with that.
No, that's something I'd be really interested in being
Yeah.
part of.
Hope to get you in the discussion though, because I think it's helpful to get your view on some of these things. Mike shared some ideas with us in the past before that. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
It'd be nice to get even a small mill going up here. When we had the precision pine, I'm not sure why, but it would be nice to have, wood products mill up here instead of shipping all of our stuff to, having to sell in the summertime, ship it over that way,
Yeah.
or
But I can,
hauling it over 3 passes or 2 passes.
but I can tell you, you're a lot better off than a lot of western towns with having some value, and so that just buys us a lot of opportunity, you know, whether we're doing a traditional sale and like you were talking about with the money coming back, going back into treasury and some here, or whether we're using some of those receipts to do that other fuels mitigation work and all, you know, it was a lot more, it was particularly a challenge in New Mexico to have markets.
I sit on the Wildland Fire Advisory Committee for the answers to the Commissioner of Public Lands for DNR. And we just sent this out to the, it's not really out for publication, it's just for people of interest so far, which, in other words, it's a draft and a draft.
Mhm.
So they didn't want it to go like to newspapers or whatever that, but they want the industry people to start weighing in and start giving input. But I thought it was really, there's some statistical evidence in there that in 1960 there were over 400 sawmills in the state of Washington. 2016, guess how many we have in the state of Washington, all over the state?
My guess, 25.
37.
Mhm.
Yeah. I grew up in the logging industry here, and when I first started hauling logs in 1974, if you counted the mom and pop sawmills, like the little, you know, everybody inclusive, anybody that manufactured lumber, there were 17 of them in Okanogan County.
Wow.
Now we have one.
I was visiting with two sawmill owners last week. One's a value-added sawmill. It goes about 130 people. And then there's the older sawmill that's next to it. It's a family mill. It's been there since 26. And the remanufacturer is actually Canadian. They're a Canadian outfit, and they were hauling a lot of spruce and lodgepole down from BC. They do have some interior second growth cedar that they take out there too. But he said that they were really lodgepole and spruce, and you know, the Zozels can't keep up with them really. But you know, I think that most everything up north is bug killed by now, and so they're actually in need here to keep that mill going. And it actually wasn't only 10 years ago. I think it was only 50 people who were working in that reman mill, and now there's 130, and they could go further than that.
Yeah, they'd like to expand.
Yeah.
Well, something again, you know, and I haven't been able to engage yet with the collaborative, but, you know, I feel like there's a lot of sort of information shared, especially within the Methow about, you know, again, and this is an issue in New Mexico, where in these dry systems, you have too many trees, you know, and too many trees per acre. I think the fact that, these trees have value here, some of them have value, and that there's a sale, you know, is still a hang up for people because of things of old. But you know, this is restoration. It's just some of it pays for itself, and some of it we're paying due, and so.
Yeah, this is 2018.
Yeah, it's definitely the reasons are different, and you know, I think we can have some good conversations and some field trips to look at what you know, what the differences on the landscape are with fire, with treatment versus not. And I've had a lot of good opportunity here with 7 or 8 public meetings that we've had to start having that conversation with some folks.
Did the McCloud fire burn into the Cub Creek, not restoration, it was actually a project. Did it burn into that timber sale that had gone on 4 or 5 years ago maybe?
I'm not sure in Cub Creek, I know in 8 Mile we had a lot of treatments.
I'm sorry, 8 Mile,
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It did hit a lot of treatments.
It did, yeah.
What was reaction to fire in those trees?
Well, I mean, it hit the ground, you
Yeah.
know, so it dropped down, yeah. And we had really good effects, you know, it really, you know, we did a couple little pieces on it, you know, to get out on Facebook and all, but that's really the only reason that 8 Mile Road could have been used as a holding feature, you know, without that, it definitely would have continued east from there.
Yeah, to Chris's point, I read, Random Links, that's a publication put out on, you're really familiar with it, you base your industry on it, but, there's also a white paper that comes where you can get the breakdown on stumpage.
Prices and stuff.
Yeah, that's actually wholesale and then retail lumber prices, but there's also a quarterly deal that comes out on stumpage, and I was amazed. Lodgepole on the east side of the mountains right now is $497 a thousand on the stump.
Wow.
Yeah. And what amazed me was cedar on the coast, their high was 1,057. Cedar inland is $1,460 a thousand. Interesting. I mean, the market's hanging in there pretty tough.
Well, something you know, I forgot to mention earlier was, you know, we had 2 sales associated with Mission that ended up no sale. But again, you know, we had some difficult access sort of issues during while the bids were open and some of those things, and I think probably just a few more unknowns than people were comfortable with, and so the intention is to get those back out for re-advertisement during fall, winter.
Yeah, I was wondering how that would go with the not wholesale, bulk treatment, because that's what the comments were about. I call it sale of treatment.
Yeah.
Commissioners, other observations?
Let's just keep the communication going. I mean, you and I talk quite often, so that's good, but having you come over and, you know, sit in front of all 3 of us and kind of give an update on what's going on is always good.
Sure, like I say, just let me know, if we wanna try to set a regular, you know, Monday on the month or whatever works, and I know, you know, Matt Marsh is gonna be acting behind Matt Reedy, and if both of us can come, you know, at the same time, would be to get
Yeah,
that.
usually if that happens, we do try and coordinate it.
Yep. Yep.
More efficient use of your time.
Yeah.
Do you know what the timeline is for replacing Reedy?
So, the announcement just closed on Friday, so, I'd say within the next couple months, we'll have, probably 3 months, we'll have somebody in place.
And the regional forester appoints that position, is that true?
Yeah, you could, I'm not sure if but most likely Mike is gonna be recommending to the region, yeah.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out.
I'm looking forward to it, I
Yeah.
think, you know, 2 of us coming in new
Yeah,
together,
yeah.
kinda, and set a good tone early.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you're probably well aware too that the new chief, Madam Chief, is real familiar with the Pacific Northwest, has 35 years of experience in the Pacific Northwest. At the National Association of Counties, I sit on the Public Land Steering Committee, and we as a group at the last Western Interregional Conference, county commissioners all got up and requested that the chief give us an audience for input in picking and choosing our new rangers, supervisors, and regional foresters. And she listened, and we got some time with her, so I'm hoping that helps in the selection process.
I guess if maybe we should send a letter to Mike Williams, just kind of stressing the, you know, the things that in the Tonapket Ranger District that we know are gonna be important, and finding a ranger up there that's gonna be, you know, a true multi-use. That knows that you gotta do everything from, you know, cattle ranching to bird watching. Should probably do that, send a letter to him, just reiterating that, hey, you know, make sure you're thinking about the things that are going on.
Next quarterly meeting for the Forest Health Collaborative is here in Okanogan, December 7th, at the PUD.
December 7th?
Yep.
Okay.
The Okanogan County Public Utility District here in Okanogan, 10 to 4. That's the quarterly.
Do you have an invite on that you can?
Yeah, I can
send
send
me?
it. I can probably one that I got at the Yakima Forest, and responded to. Somehow I'll get you.
Okay.
You're gonna give us a card?
I don't
You
have
haven't
one yet.
That's cool.
But I can write it down for
Yeah,
you.
that'd be good.
Yeah.
I just actually sent it to you.
Okay.
So I just had it, I happen to have it on my phone, and I was able to just.
Great.
forward it. All right.
I guess just thoughts on, you know, over time, of course, we get kind of used to your legs that are over there. You know, maybe your ideas on, what a stewardship contract could look like in Methow.
Mm-hmm. No, it's something I'm definitely, you know, again, the important thing to me is, you know, we put a lot of time and energy into this. You want it to be a scale that's appropriate.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think stewardship and is one way to look at expanding that, so absolutely.
That's the discussion, that'd be great.
Other discussion points, Commissioner? Have you two met?
Not
Charlene Schumacher is my senior planner. She does a fair amount of the natural resources work. So,
Nice to meet you, Sean.
one, two. If you would please, go ahead and grab Rocky, grab the table file from Pam, and maybe get our business cards to give to him. Thank you.
Grab the which file?
Paper.
So, did you live like right close to Taos?
Out on the edge, you know, I was a district ranger about 25 miles west of there, and so I worked there for about 5 years, and then I was in the supervisor's office there in Taos. So,
What forest is that?
Carson National Forest, beautiful, beautiful high desert. We lived at about 7,000 feet, and the forest went up to about 13,000.
Wow.
So the climate, I think, here should be, it looks to be on paper pretty similar, but we'll see if that, if
Yeah,
that's true or
I don't
not.
think that you can, there's nothing on paper that's ever gonna tell you what the climate's like over there. Man,
Yeah.
one day it could be 19 below, and the next day it can be fine.
Yeah.
Well, the big thing here was, the big draw for us is winter sun, you know, and, you know, you can tolerate a lot if the sun's out.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so,
You guys
Even if it's crispy.
downhill across the-
Downhill,
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna have to learn the cross country, but,
Well, the only cross-country skiing I would be doing
I say it's called hooky, Bob.
Yeah.
Commissioner, not
Well, I haven't tried my knee on it.
Yeah.
My knee.
Other observations?
Well, just thanks for
Yeah.
coming
Yeah, thanks
over
for-
and
Yeah, thank
you.
introducing yourself.
I'm appreciative of the invite, so, and looking forward to being here and working with you all, so.
Good.
Thanks so much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Certainly more than welcome to remain and listen to the other titillating subjects.
I can do that for a minute.
Yes, feel free to
Leave my card with you, yes, thank you.
jump up, leave anytime you feel fit. Oh,
I already got your
I'm gonna have to go get a card for you.
I'll be here for a minute.
Okay.
Good to meet you. Okay.
Good. Tell us how much money you're gonna, of the taxpayers you're gonna spend, huh?
Well, I suppose a good place to begin is to tell you all the things that are different now than when we tried to put together our 2019 proposal. I had not yet prepared any real amendments to the 2018 budget, kind of waiting to see where the three grants in play were going to land, and I still don't necessarily know exactly where the three grants are in place, so I'm inclined to not change, I mean, backing up. Obviously, we're not underway in 2018 like I thought we might be on at least the well tracking. One could argue that means we'll be spending more in 2019. I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. So on one hand, I suppose my recommendation is we leave the 2019 submittals alone.
Right, yeah, cause we're
to-
not gonna increase spending, it's just the money will have to get rolled over and spent.
We'll have to roll it over at the end. Now, one thing that is different is, since we submitted this, the voluntary stewardship program, while the planning activity is done, plans adopted. But according to Commerce,
Just said yay.
according to Commerce, the contract we have with them allows us to move into implementation. And there's still money remaining in the contract to do that. However, our contract with the Conservation District doesn't necessarily contemplate that. So now that the plan's adopted, I need to sit down with Craig, or I suppose start off with you, where you want the Conservation District through amending their contract, morph into implementation, if you want to try to get a better scope of work up in terms of what implementation looks like, and do another RFQ, or how we wish to approach that. Now, some of that will be, arguably, will be 2018 spending. We have enough room in what we projected for 2018 to not have to amend the budget in our professional services line, depends obviously on the scope of what we spend for implementation. Implementation at this point would take largely the form of outreach, the creation and printing of educational materials, in terms of, okay, now we have a volunteer stewardship program, so what? You know, what do we do with all of that? And we could begin to structure how we're going to do our ongoing monitoring. The plan contemplates that the county will do that. It contemplates a kind of, on an ancillary basis, the Conservation District, through the work they do with farm management plans and whatnot, anyway, will feed into the monitoring program. And still some details there to work out, but I put nothing in the 2019 budget at this point for implementation. So, And, there's some real, the contract with Commerce runs through June 2019. Now, they seem confident that whatever money hasn't been over, I share no such confidence when the legislature begins to look for money. But at any rate, there's still some work we can get done by the end of 18 and at least the first half of 2019.
Can we as a county do any of that work? I mean, do we have the capacity to do
We,
any of
and which actually would be then the next question, we can ramp up and try to do it in-house. In terms of putting together educational materials, you know, we work with the Conservation District, they properly so would expect to have that time compensated. I don't necessarily have an agreement in place to do that, but depending upon the scope of the agreement, we may be able to do that through a simple IGA, you know, rather than go out for a full-blown RFP.
I personally would like to see of the implementation process.
Yeah, we need some piece.
Yeah, to base a decision on.
Fair enough. Well, what we can do is begin to isolate that out of the plan. Because there's some fairly specific things that we need, I think, we need to do now. I mean, the first and foremost call was before you guys came on board, part of the rationale or the strategy, if you prefer, for having the Farm Bureau, horticulture, other than them obviously being agricultural advocacy groups, was that was part of the outreach. Those members on the planning unit, or the work group, I guess I should say, would then report back and communicate through their organizations, and through that, communicate with the public at large. I don't know to what effect that happened, but I know now that the work group is finished with that first major tier of the project, we either have to rebuild that or somehow figure out through the work group to do that outreach. Now, part of the discussion was to go ahead and use some of the money left over to create those kinds of materials. You know, this is what the voluntary stewardship program means. These are the objectives. Try to isolate those key points out so we can begin to communicate that through whatever vehicle to the public. Now, we, the county, could arguably do that. I mean, we'd have to figure out how to free up the man hours, we'd have to figure out how to do it, there's money to do that with, but it could be done. Without any kind of an RFQ, we could just pull the conservation district in when we need to and go on about our business. So maybe a good place to start, I just offer it up now just as kind of a footnote for the 2019 budget. I have not built anything into the 2019 budget at this point that we can lay out what I guess in my mind plan contemplates that would look like. We can begin to lay some estimates out in terms of expenses. But say that mostly what I want to convey to you is we don't have any ongoing expenses for VSP in the 2019 budget. In terms of the local capacity grant, I'll just dovetail off our last discussion. I have not amended the 2018 budget. I haven't asked for any amendments to the 2018 budget. I don't have any money yet. In terms of the 2019 budget, we scattered those expenses. We have that worksheet we prepared, but we, excuse me, I don't remember what I said, but what I'm talking about is our well tracking grant. So other than the planner one position, which we specifically marked as a grant position, and that number does include everything, benefits, everything else. So the number that should be there in the section would be essentially the same, little under the planner one line that falls immediately below that. So we need to adjust that.
That was going to be my question. So what is the base salary amount for
Do you have that handy?
If you can email that to me, then I will correct that, because
Okay.
the costs that are associated right there are based on that being the salaried amount. So that'll probably free up, what, $7,000 to $10,000?
Yep, thereabouts. So,
Probably free up more.
say the planner one position currently in the actually gone up a step because of the longevity. So it'll be something short of $39,450 that ought to be there, because we're gonna bring them in at an entry one planner one spot. So, and then now I'm assuming that if the calculations for everything else was based on 51,858, then those numbers will probably come down too.
Right.
So. Anyway, in terms of the rest of the expenses, we scattered through the budget based upon the worksheet that I generated. We didn't pull out a specific project one, because that was our discussion at the time. So, assuming we still stay that course, then it's my suggestion that once we fix the planner one grant position spot, the other expenses for 2019 are probably still pretty close. Because I don't think nothing else we're gonna have, just because we have more money available, I don't think we're gonna be able to spend more necessarily. We can only do it as fast as we can do it, so all those numbers are probably still legitimate in terms of the well tracking grant.
So, okay, yeah. Yeah, the physical ability of time is the constraint on.
We can only spend
spending
it so fast
Right.
if we're spending it legitimately, so whatever I've had worked into, and did you make copies of that worksheet we did?
I did not, I haven't it yet, but I could.
To the commissioners, what I have, this is the worksheet we did up for the well tracking grant. I mean, I sent it out some time ago. The commissioners would like a fresh copy of that, we can certainly make you one.
I don't need one, it's in here. You set it out.
And the numbers for 2019, if we don't change them, they're already built into the budget. What I did have was some projected 2018 expenses, which I haven't come to pass yet, because we don't have the grant money, so it's just information at this point. But just say I did send it out with the grant application form, I don't know, some while back now.
So your current budget was 705,000 roughly. The request for 2019 is 775 roughly. So we got 70,000 bucks, we got 58 that's in there, that's not the correct number, but we got 51,858, and then we got some additional, did you up anything else significantly as far as expenses go? I'm looking through here just to see.
Well, professional services is where the bulk of it should show up, but in terms of comparison,
But that's what we had budgeted last year, was 115,000.
Mm-hmm.
the professional services is where we would have had well, no, we didn't put any. We didn't put any in for the WRIA 49 effort yet, right? Because we didn't know what we had. Where's that? Get that little- there it is. That's what I'm looking for. I'm slowly losing my running tally of my grants.
Oh yeah, and then we got the half a year of planners one, so we got 18 there, 51 there is 69, 70, okay, yeah. So it's just in those two positions.
I do have a question, I just noticed, on the repair and maintenance, line, did I miss a 0 in the 19 column?
Yes.
I'm sorry, where were you?
And right here, repairs and maintenance, there should be an extra 0 right here.
$80 probably won't make it.
Yeah,
Which one?
sorry about
Repairs and
that.
maintenance is not as
Right. And the question was, I'm sorry?
there was a 0.
Oh,
If I missed the 0.
so there is, all right.
Uh-oh. Well, that's a big difference there. It's okay, at least we caught it now. So-
Repairs and maintenance of all courses are, that actually we just got the
We just got the-
invoice for that, didn't we? So that's essentially, I mean, there's a few other things that come out of it, but mostly it's our software payment, which comes once, about this time of year.
And then the only other line that was increased was your travel line by about $1,500.
So, shouldn't that planner one position be right around $36,000 or something like that? That, shouldn't it be that we budgeted down there?
You didn't get that from Deb, yeah.
No, that 51,858 is what was given from Deb, and Carrie and I spoke about figuring out the actual number.
Yeah, we need to, figure that out. That was a grouped number instead of just the salary number, so it'll address, it should free up quite a bit.
Yeah, cause I was gonna say that, the planner one position that we have there, 558-60-1112, we got for 60 full, which would be a new planner one coming in, because we don't have that position filled.
Right.
So that would be a one, which would be the exact same as the new planner one coming in with the grant position.
The number that, that was given was, everything was included.
I know.
And-
Okay, we know that.
No, yeah, we know that. I'm trying to figure out roughly how much money, so
I can make a phone
36,
call.
46, 56.
Okay, so we haven't yet got the number.
I can get it, I'll step out and make a call.
And then, yeah, that would be good, and then I guess the only thing else is that if that wage line way up there is that much more, all of the FICA and Medicare and stuff like
benefits
that.
All of that would have,
pretty-
all of that would have gone up too when that was calculated.
So now it's gonna adjust not only that line, but all those other lines that are highlighted also.
So once that pulls down, then the other ones will pull down some too. The professional services line is where we projected out at least part of our expenses for 2019. We probably need to take another look at that to see what we're gonna end up doing with the WRIA 49 grants. And one of the, actually, let me back up. One of the wild cards, again, one of the wild cards, and I'm not sure what to do with it exactly, is our $50,000 local capacity grant. Now that will show up as we out as revenue if we use it to defray expenses attached to administering the WRIA 49 plan revisions. Then while the expense lines in our budget won't change, we'll have revenue to offset my time, Rocky's time, Char's time, you know, however we orchestrate all of that. I don't know how to project that yet, because I don't know precisely how we're going to go about facilitating the 49 watershed plan revision. When last we chatted with the Conservation District, they were kind of willing to do that. Well, now the word I get is perhaps not. So if we do more of it in-house, then we'll have to figure out how to extrapolate that back.
So
If
you,
we
yeah,
go out with an RFQ for someone else to come in and do that, then I have no idea at this point what they're gonna want for it.
so you only put $10,000 in there as a revenue line, which that could be low, that could be high on that first site.
So that's kind of the play too. I talked to Vanessa early last week, and that, well, maybe I've already told you, the local capacity grant, they're putting together those packets. The watershed planning money, no, not yet. And then now we're changing our well tracking. Although, in terms of the numbers, I don't see that as being remarkably different. We're just gonna change the focus.
Yeah.
And which will change the deliverables. But I think the expenses are still gonna be largely the same, because we're still talking about the same time and effort to do the same thing. We're just doing it in a little different order, so. I mean, in terms of that kind of, as outside sideboards, in terms of the changes that I still need to take a look at as we get more information from the Department of Ecology. Were there any particular questions or issues the commissioners had?
No, I'm looking, cause our revenue went up by about $38,000. And our expenses are probably going up by 80,000, maybe 40-some thousand.
MSA, I don't think we're contemplating any changes, like I told you.
What made the, conservation district, no,
I'm sorry.
what made the conservation district awful?
Capacity,
Oh,
I mean, the,
I thought when we were in the initial discussion with them, they were happy with the situation and the revenue was gonna be okay.
my discussion's about 6 days old,
Oh,
and, I think they're anticipating a fairly intensive process for a couple years.
Well, actually, they're trying to anticipate it, I think. There's a lot of unknowns that makes them nervous.
And understandably so.
Yeah.
I mean, and, you know, we may get a better handle after Thursday. The Department of Ecology isn't necessarily prepared to lay out in degree exactly what this thing's gonna look like, but they are prepared to offer up some insight in terms of the expectation. Now, the net ecological benefit discussion is still ongoing. They haven't issued their final guidance. So, you know, that will certainly shape what the final work product has to look like, so, without getting, I mean, not departing from budget too much, but the observation to offer up is I'm not exactly sure. You know, Craig and I had a decent idea of what it might look like in terms of professional service fees for a year working on this thing. If they don't do it, then I don't have any idea what another operation would want for something like that. No one's done it. Long time. If we do it in-house, figure out how to go about doing that. I
So-
don't know that I could take it on with the current warm bodies that I have, but I also don't really know how I would hire that skill set necessarily. So I'd have to take a look at shifting either stuff I'm doing or whatever to get, to free me up to do the other, or I don't know what it would look like. I just don't know what it would look like at this point.
On the current expense revenue sheet that you handed out, and under the local capacity, there's various lines that are listed for revenues.
No, but they're not separate lines under local capacity. It's in a different font and it's moved over. That's just a single $10,000 line there for local capacity.
No, I was actually, although those are not, that indent doesn't mean it.
Doesn't mean it.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Okay, so regardless, those lines that are, that deal with revenues, how do you come up with those lines?
The local capacity?
Well, no, the lines below, well, yeah, local capacity too.
No.
From local capacity on down.
The well tracking grant actually came off the worksheet that I prepared. That was that. So we tried to extrapolate based upon the Planner 1. We based a fair amount of it on some of the work that we've done under our water application, when we were doing the water availability applications, the amount of time it was taking and that sort of thing. So when we went through and did the well tracking grant, those numbers are probably close for 2019.
I'm talking about below local capacity, all the ones down below, your sales tax, revenue, state agency collections, those revenue lines.
Oh, I'm sorry, interfund.
Yep,
Okay, well, the interfund zeroed out.
yep.
Parks and Trails is zeroed out. Sales tax, that was based upon what we put in throughout the year.
So that represents an allocation of sales tax revenues that you've earned in the department? Oh, okay.
We sell some stuff.
Yeah, like if they sell a ream of paper or something like that,
Well, I mean, the sales tax, map books, as one example, we sell map books, and occasionally we sell maps we collect. sales tax off that, so that's where that came from.
Okay, so I have a question. The well tracking grant, if we got a number from Deb that said all-inclusive one's gonna be 5167 or something, shouldn't the well tracking grant revenue be exactly the same? Cause that is gonna be used.
Yeah, why did we break it out that way?
It all came into one line, but we broke it out in the expenditure for the,
Is
So,
there,
so well tracking grant for 48,810.
for the new laptop.
What?
For the new computer that needs to be gotten.
Where's my,
is there any expenses in a personnel, within personnel that a grant cannot pay for? Like the,
It just, I think, depends on the grant, how it's written.
say the expenses, again, are scattered through the budget. So, this is the worksheet that tells you how I came up with 48,810.
so it's not, we're not paying for the person. It's in there throughout.
Well, the planner one position
Planner one position.
through 2019 was projected out. I used the actual, we didn't use the 57, whatever showed up in the budget. When I did the worksheet, I don't think I based it on that. So we have the planner one grant, or excuse me, the planner one position, we haven't bought anything yet. We projected a computer, some level of mileage. There was some ads that we built in, most of it was staff. So, what we
Okay.
did was project those expenses and ripple them through the budget, and then what I anticipated billing against the grant was my $48,810.
Okay, so I guess, but my question is, okay, if we go up here a little bit, oh, sorry, we're not in the right one.
On the expense one.
On the expense, yeah, on the expense in planning.
We didn't base it on.
That's okay. To 0, 0.
We did a couple months of,
What,
we did it like 9 months of the
Oh,
planner one
it did it to
division.
me too here.
for 2019?
Okay,
And then,
so if we look up that grant position up there, Deb gave a number of $51,858 as being the all-inclusive cost of a new plan.
Correct.
Okay, are we 100% funding that all-inclusive cost through the grant?
Yes.
Okay, so then our grant revenue is only showing 48,810. So if we have $51,000 that is gonna be our cost for that person, plus we're gonna have a computer and some travel time, then our well tracking grant revenue should go up to reflect that 51,897 plus the computer plus the travel.
Why did we only do 9 months?
cause I thought the grant was on good through. I don't have that note in front of me.
It was just, it was a clerical error based on the fact that you only thought it was for 9 months.
I look here. Never be gone 2 days before your budget study session.
It's all right.
Just a little observation
Don't
for.
worry, I'm trying to help, not hinder,
When I,
right?
Yes, she's going to be texting you those numbers
Okay.
soon.
I'm gonna get that number.
It's a working
What?
document.
Yeah, that's right.
okay.
And the more mistakes you can find in it, the better off you are in the.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sounds like you guys fixed my boo-boos a little better than that.
You can't make as many as I've made.
Okay, there we go.
If you're doing something,
This,
you gotta make some.
That's right.
Yeah. Still hasn't caught up to my mistake yet, missing a 0.
I projected out, let's see, fiscal year 19. For all 3 tasks. What'd you get?
Well, we put the planner in for a full year, but I think that when we did the when we did that, we only put them in for 9 months.
For what reason? Cause that was the end of the fiscal year?
I believe that that's the end of the fiscal year, yes.
So it ties back to our, what we're anticipating will be our grant
Running out.
agreement.
Mhm.
So we only have, or why would we do 9 months? That makes no sense. End of the fiscal year with the state's the end of June.
Maybe it was 6 months. I don't have that note.
Well, I'm in the grant itself. It looks like we only projected it out through the end of June, cause that was our anticipated funding cycle. So we'll have to renew.
Gotcha.
9 months was because I thought it was, we were, it was gonna start
You're
this
thinking
year.
9 months altogether?
Yes,
Okay, so it's not 9 months, 6 months.
6 months.
Okay, so is the okay, this is okay, this will get fixed, this is not a big deal. But over on the well tracking grant income, then, is that based on 6 months of salaries, benefits and everything, plus a computer, plus travel?
Yes.
Okay, so actually that line item may go up then by whatever the additional is.
Depends on what they renew.
Right, depending on what they renew.
So it only is for the fiscal year, it's not built into.
Well, going back over the past discussions now, when we started this discussion, we thought we'd have the well tracking grant several months ago. So anticipating through the end of the fiscal year, the $60.
Right.
But we're nowhere near an entire year now, so we ran it out 6 months into 2019. We haven't done anything for 2018. So depending upon how much is left and whether they're willing to over, we'll have to amend our 2019.
And as far as I know, even if they don't roll it over, the local capacity grant could, fund
Well,
the rest of that.
We could, I mean, that relatively new discussion now, if the local capacity grant will allow us to continue that, we're talking about
So that
a budget.
position went down.
Cause I only wired it through to the end of June in anticipation of the revenue,
Is that when the fiscal year for the local capacity grant ends?
all of the states,
All the state's grants.
when will die the end of June, unless they renew. Okay. So,
But-
which is actually one of the questions I'm trying to work out with Vanessa. If we get the $150,000, how are they gonna allocate that? Or are we not even gonna see it until the start of the new fiscal year,
Right.
July 1? I don't know.
So the well tracking grant, right now is only at 6 months. We have a $60,000 grant. So moving past June, if they renew, then we can do a budget adjustment
But we'd have to do an
amendment to pick up the rest of that.
right?
And if that doesn't get picked up, hopefully, because our local capacity grant says that it's supposed to renew for,
Well,
2 to 3 years.
Another question, which I'm still trying to get Vanessa, and then she doesn't know either. It's not that she won't tell me, she's trying to find out from her head shit. When she says renew, it'll be an additional appropriation. But what I don't know is if that means I have $50,000, may have $50,000 to spend
Right.
between whenever I get it to the end of June,
June.
and then get another $50,000. Or if what I don't spend, they'll roll over, or if what I don't spend, they'll roll over and give me another $50,000. I don't know. I
Right.
don't know the answers to those questions.
So that one, Perry, is actually really important, because that is quite a bit of money. I mean, that's a half a year's salary for,
Yeah, it's a lot to absorb.
for that planner one. That's a lot for current expense to absorb on, well, on the thought process that we might not get it. So it would be nice to know, I mean, I know you don't know, but if we can figure out if we're gonna be able to get paid for whatever it winds up being.
51,858 is the total for that whole position.
Or as the
Now
planner,
these are
let
adjusted
let me
out.
make sure I'm tracking what you're asking me. The planner one position was tied specifically and solely to the well tracking.
Okay,
If the
so,
well tracking grant dies at the end of June and is not renewed, the planner one position goes away.
but if we can utilize, that was before we thought, we didn't realize that we could use the local capacity grant.
Well, no, fair enough, but I didn't build that into the budget.
I understand that.
Oh, okay.
I totally understand that.
Oh, okay.
And that's what I'm saying, is that, at $51,000, 25,5 or whatever. Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying that if the grant goes away, the position goes away.
Position goes away.
Because it's grant, it's 100% grant.
So there's
Okay,
not a
but-
question of current expense absorbing.
But
that.
right now, we have it set for 100% expense and 50% revenue. So
Well-
right now, in a balanced budget,
Fair enough in terms of these preliminary numbers, but the 51 whatever should come out. That's not a good number.
well, no, total, okay, the total for a year for a person is $51,000.
Right, but if we only laid that out for 6 months and we're still,
Then we should budget only for half a year
Right.
if we have, and then that would tie, or match up with our grant
Right.
funding
Exactly.
cycle.
then if local, I mean, there's gonna still be work to do. We're not gonna
Right.
get nothing, all of this done.
But then if we pick up, then we do a budget adjustment with revenue and expense that then matches.
Okay.
And then continue the planner one spot.
Okay, so these numbers right now reflect the full year, they're corrected numbers, so
Okay.
now you want me to go ahead and adjust those to a
Cut.
6?
Cut that in half because that's of the grant revenue amount that we have in there.
Okay.
And then that will mean that everything's funded and squared away for 6 months. And then if we get more, if the grant rolls over, we get more revenue, we just do the, net wash, budget adjustment.
Sure.
Unless, I mean,
No,
that's not like a statement or anything, I'm trying to look for,
yes, that makes sense to me,
okay.
Commissioner.
Now, in terms of the local capacity, do you want me to try to build different numbers in for 2019?
Well, first of all, it would be nice to know, I mean, this all kind of hinges around what our planning department does. You know, I mean, and so if we're able to generate through VSP, through, local capacity grant, through whatever, generate more revenue
Mhm.
by having an extra person and it's offsetting,
Right?
then I think that we may want to look at that. So I would say that if we got a scope of the VSP, implementation plan, and then.
Number for that, is
No, and because we don't know, he zeroed it out up here in the revenue.
Right, yeah.
But
Okay.
if
Yeah,
Commerce
we
is telling us.
thought we
that
were done with VSP until we got a new implementation contract. Commerce has now said, now your existing contract will cover implementation too. So I've got the grant, what's left in the grant, through the end of June.
Okay, so we could offset some of our personnel costs by doing outreach. I don't know if that's possible or not, but.
Yes, to some extent. I mean, we can, with the current hands, let me say it that way, now that's assuming I'm interviewing Thursday for the planner. This is not the grant planners, this
Yes.
was the planner one position left in the budget, for the last 6 months or so, anyway, at any rate, I got more than enough money in the 2018 budget now because things are getting so late in the year to deal with that planner one spot. We
Right.
projected it forward into the 2019 budget.
Mhm.
So, with that person on board, of course, right now, I'm talking about a planner one.
Yeah.
So I can't really turn a planner one loose to facilitate a WRIA 49 watershed plan revision or anything like that.
Mhm.
So if we're talking about VSP, the local capacity grant, pulling that work more in-house. I could probably do that, but it's gonna stretch things.
Offset your other work.
It's gonna stretch things really, really, really thin.
Okay.
If we use that money to increase capacity by bringing in more personnel, we can try to do that. But I'm always reluctant to hardwire
I know.
personnel in on grants, cause then when the grants go away and they're doing stuff, we either have to stop doing that stuff or find more money to do it.
Right.
Or just cut a current expense, and I can see my finance officer nodding vehemently as
No, I
we're
know.
doing this,
I know.
because it's a pitfall.
It's a big.
That's a pitfall you don't
It
wanna
is
fall
grants.
into, you know, so I'm in a little bit, I probably sound hesitant as hell, because what I'm doing is
Oh, that's
cataloging.
okay.
I'm
That's-
cataloging all the skill sets I have at my disposal,
Mhm.
to try to figure out what I can do in a relative short order till the end of June. And I have no confidence whatsoever that the legislature will renew any of it. I mean, they'll sweep the budget like they do, and some of it we'll get and some of it we won't. Now, they might agree with that, because that's kind of been the project for a while now, although, yeah, no, I understand. In
Well,
terms of,
they know that if the funding dies, the whole project dies.
so we may
So
see,
they've got a vested interest.
they have some interest in renewing that, so we may get some money reallocated for that. Or we may just roll over what we have left, I don't know which, if either,
Okay,
so.
so might I propose that we see a scope of work for the VSP outreach, just so we kinda know what we're talking about, cause if it's too much, then we can go out for an RFQ to do it. And then we leave the revenue amounts alone, because those are, the 48,810 is a 6-month deal that they've worked out. The 10,000 local capacity is just a guess, right?
That was just a number.
And then.
Yeah, okay, I won't
Just
absolutely say
an
that,
amortization of the 60s.
It's actually a 6-month expense for the employee plus a computer
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm
travel.
saying,
Yes.
The number for local capacity was based, at least in part, on what we have built out, correct me if I'm wrong, through the VSP program. Hockey's time, my time, all of that, so it's a wild ass guess.
Okay. And then we cut the new planner one grant position to 50%,
Okay.
along with all the benefits stuff, putting a note on there that,
Could result in a budget amendment.
yeah, that probably will result in a budget amendment to revenue and expense.
Are you hearing anything that isn't matching up with our discussion?
No.
Most of the rest of the lines are business as usual.
Did you make reference to a work plan earlier in the conversation, or did I just hear that?
Work plan.
Work plan for the planning department?
For VSP.
No, just in general, actually.
If I did, I'm not,
You didn't mean it.
I didn't mean it, I haven't created one.
Yeah, you know,
The work, I mean, we created the work plan for the well tracking grant.
right,
And, actually, we went through that exercise at the request of the commissioners in terms of what everyone is doing. We're in the process now of, periodically I do this, we spot check what everyone's doing.
right.
So I can keep that workload reallocated out to where I don't have anybody
Yeah, no, I got that.
collapsing under the weight of it.
That's good. I was thinking more about the list of projects that we have really in the hopper that, and, you know, they're the ones that aren't getting done. And there are projects that aren't getting done
There are.
because they fall lower in priorities as we get new things.
Yeah, fair enough, we actually, a staff level, last week, I guess it was, or the week before, listed out the things, critical areas ordinance, for instance, I brought that up with the commissioners, that's kind of languished, and we need to probably pull that up, some of the thing, Hubbard, for instance, is working on essentially a summary. This is what the new Shoreline Master Program means to you. Those sorts of things. I should, why don't I put that all down in a memo for the
There may be even
commissioners?
some operational issues or administrative issues that go with that. That list that you have for the Shoreline Master Program, some needs that you didn't have before.
Okay.
We talked about them in the letter. And airport zoning.
I say, there's a long list of the things that are already on the list.
Been on it.
We aren't really getting much done on at this point in time. But there's also a list of the things I think we ought to be doing,
Yeah, that's prioritizing.
That aren't even on the list yet.
So they're not even on the list yet.
so,
I gotta, Wildfire Advisory budget on the DNR.
Okay.
Conference call.
Budget.
for,
Budget.
kind of on that, for instance, on that list, in terms of any kind of outreach to the cities on capital facility that's taken the shape of an annual report, we're not really working to coordinate that sort of thing with the cities, mostly through lack of free hands. And that's, the whole transfer, the road standards, we've talked about the road standards forever. Public Works agrees they need to be redone, we agree they need to be redone, but neither one of us has picked up the road standards. We just talked today about the emergency management, your wildfire protection plan, your hazard mitigation plan. In past, our involvement with that has been essentially to point out things in the comprehensive plan that they ought to be aware of. There hasn't been, and in my opinion, there should be, an effort to integrate those plans with your land use regulation. Otherwise, I believe you used the phrase the other day, it's a shelf plan.
Yeah, it is.
And that's exactly what they are. If we really don't use those, and here's the pitfall, if you just use those to inform your land use regulation, that's okay if they were written with that in mind. If you write a wildfire protection plan that there's absolutely no way economically or politically, for that matter, anyone can implement,
Shelf plan.
then it's a shelf plan. And it's almost worse than a shelf plan, because now you're not in compliance with the plans you've generated, which is not an enviable position to be in. So, I mean, to kind of the underlying question you posed, there's all sorts of things. Now, whether they center with the planning department or somewhere else is not really my point. Emergency management could work on that integration. Public Works could work on the integration with the road standards. We'd be involved certainly, but we wouldn't necessarily be spear pointing the effort. But there's a number of things like that we'll get around to doing.
On these grants that we're looking at right here, what type of grants are you able to charge administration fees?
I'm sorry?
Administration fees?
Like administration overhead.
Administration.
That's usually, within the grant structure, so that was gonna be one of my questions. These grants have an overhead percent we can charge, do they have match requirements?
None of them have match requirement. They all have, well, actually, I haven't seen a contract for the watershed plan. I've seen a contract for the local capacity grant. We kind of have, at least in the beginning, a meeting of the minds in terms of what we could charge the well tracking. We built some of that in terms of the revenue projection. They usually have, what's the word I'm looking for, a maximum.
Yeah, and they usually have a match requirement somewhere, it's usually some percent that you have to.
We don't on these,
No.
we don't on these, there are reimbursement grants for specific work. What I have never liked to do is if they have an allocation in terms of what they'll allow for administrative overhead, rather than just billing that, I always bill specific hours. Hours or specific expenses or something like that. And my theory being, rather than just submitting a blanket voucher, which then I have to justify at some later date, I'd rather justify it up front and do the billing. VSP, for instance, VSP, Rocky's time, my time, Hubbard's time, is all
That's-
billed against it.
But that's putting together the work plan. That's not actually having to administer the actual grant application and do the A-19s and stuff like that.
Well, we include that too.
That's
You do.
what
The
he said.
VSP, Rocky going through the invoice, the time sheets and all
Okay,
that.
gotcha.
It's all, but we don't bill a person, we bill if it takes 5 hours. If it takes 2 hours, do that, we bill 2 hours.
It's a different kind of grant than what you normally see on a
Okay, that's
competitive
what,
basis too.
Right.
to me,
um, Competing with a lot of other
Yeah.
entities with, and for something that you've come up with, you have to do, rather than the state came up with what we had to do, it starts to look a little different.
yeah, so it doesn't have like the 10% overhead, you can charge 7, 15,
I
none of
think
that, that's
not on a
nice.
plan
Well,
grant like this, yeah.
Oh, we need more of them.
Well, cause it's so, yeah, well, and it's so much tied into it,
Per hour.
Right.
administration, but I see the overhead's part
Of
you're
the
talking
total
about.
grant.
Um,
Of the hour.
Wow.
But, you know,
Still
the deal
fixing
is though, I mean, there's not enough money to do what you need to do.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah,
20%.
hence the
Right,
match
you're robbing Peter to pay
requirement,
Paul, and you're
yeah.
paying
Yeah.
administration, but
Yeah.
the thing is, if you're gonna run out of money, right, then, I mean, if the grant is going to run out and you can charge an administration fee and you're not able to capitalize on all that money,
Mhm.
then you should be able to capitalize on the administration fees if it's not already built into the time that you're working on.
Which
But
makes
he's
sense, but it
building
sounds
it.
like you calculated that out and that's all included in your, yeah.
So, on the postage, we got 87.50, we haven't used very much, well, this is as of 6:30, what's, can
Sure,
you
I can
tell?
tell you what it is right
It's
now.
in your year-to-date I gave you.
Excellent.
Postage
Right.
right as of today is 31.32.
31.32, so we're not having to send out all those postcards and stuff like that? Is that,
That was what started, or that's what left us with some extra money when we changed that process, when we all the water availability. Talked about one foot or not, but in anticipation of some of the outreach that we were looking at having to do, I was hesitant to drop it down much. Now, we could try.
but that could be grant reimbursed also?
Well, some of it could, arguably, some of the local capacity grant may.
Yeah, I
pick
mean,
this up.
I would say anything that has to do with.
But
the
then that
RIA
wouldn't
49 plan
drop
number?
that wouldn't drop my expenses though.
No,
We could
I know
just
it wouldn't, I know it wouldn't drop your expenses, but it would increase the revenue.
Increase the rate. And I'm hoping that I'll have, before we get too much farther down the path, at least a statement, if not a scope of work, in terms of what we can use the local capacity grant for. Cause that may allow us to charge more against that than I mean, right now, for instance, the work we're doing, we're trying to keep a running tally. Because according to Vanessa, now this, another discussion, according to Vanessa, we can reach back to January 19, 2018, in terms of what we bill against the local capacity.
Right.
Now, how precisely we do.
In writing.
Have, well, you know, fair enough.
I'll have
Whether
those
that's
in
true or
this-
not, it remains to be seen, and how they're gonna work that into any kind of subsequent contract remains to be seen, but they tell me we can do it, so.
That's cool.
Okay, and then on the travel, that $4,000 line item, is that because we're gonna have new folks in here, or what's the?
We built some travel in, one, travel also pays my planning commission for their mileage, so now we have a full planning commission, and I'm anticipating more meetings, in 2019 tied to the comp plan, and arguably subsequently a zone code. I think we built a little bit in for the, well tracking grant, but that, of course, would be offset by that. Depending upon how, whether they're in a company rate or how we do that. That was pretty much what that was all about. We're actually spending, we calculated out for the planning commission, and the mileage they charge is pretty big. But that's what led to that.
Okay.
Do you know what percentage of the planning department's budget is strictly current expense?
And it's strictly what, Commissioner?
Current expense that we plug into it, you're not outside of all your revenues and grants?
I haven't calculated that lately. Most of the time, virtually all of it, because we don't really operate with that much grant. We have the Upper Columbia Salmon Recovery that comes through.
Right.
This year, we had voluntary stewardship, which we, of course, didn't normally have. Most of the time.
Oh, yeah. How come we don't have, on current expense revenue, how come we don't have, the Upper Columbia Sound Recovery Board dollars?
Good question. Did Shar not report any? Or did it just not get in it?
Cause that's, we get,
I didn't have any.
It wasn't in there.
Okay, well,
cause we get,
Shar bills
10
out still Upper Columbia Salmon Recovery.
Yeah, we get, what is it, 10.5 or something for board support, up to 10,500?
We've gotten that much this year.
Say, so far we billed 4551.
Okay.
Then it shows 0% received. Why is that?
We didn't budget anything for it.
That's 2019. This is 2018 budget. It shows 0% received. Why did that come off here? Is that showing up somewhere else?
No, I don't know why that does that.
Mm-hmm.
On the Eden,
Well, anyway, moral of the story. Yes, there should be a revenue showing for Upper Columbia
Because
Salmon
it was in a
Recovery.
budget.
right,
So percent received calculates based on your budget to what you've actually received.
Oh, I see. Okay, because
Yeah.
we don't have a
We
specific.
didn't do a
okay.
budget for it last year either, so if you can please email me a budget amount, I will be happy to add it to
Okay,
the 19.
all right, fair enough. Now I get,
Yeah.
we don't have.
You're gonna have to average it out because it depends on how much work she's doing for, like, when I go to meetings.
Okay.
It's strictly billed out, whatever
So
Shar
if we
does.
take the 4,500, just to make it easy, divide it by the
We don't
9.
budget specific expenses to that. It reimburses Shar's time
Right.
and travel and things
Right.
like that. We pay that out of our regular expense line and then show the revenue in.
Yeah, but that's still an extra 45 or
Well,
5,000
fair enough. No,
bucks of revenue.
yeah,
that-
it should still be there. But what, moral of the story, won't affect the expenses,
Right, we just wanna make sure we
but it
reflect
will,
it in the revenue.
yeah, will affect.
So if
the
we
revenue.
kind of go by what we've done to date and average it out, it would be approximately $6,000.
That's probably about
Do you
right.
want me to go ahead and add that to the budget?
Sure, well, please, thank you.
Yeah.
And then when you go back, double check with Shar to make sure we're not looking at anything in the contract or something weird. That would change that.
We don't, yeah, you can double check, no, we are, but.
I mean, I know in times past, because I didn't know the status of their funding, therefore I didn't know the status of any contract we were likely to see, we just didn't do it
We
until
passed,
knew.
we passed a budget that had the full
Okay.
board support amount.
So I think in this particular case, it just fell through the cracks. but-
Yeah,
I got it added for you.
okay. Okay, what's this state agency collection? Is some,
Agency.
there's a revenue line over here that says state agency collection, and it's $4,550.
It's 380, it's a 389, which tells me it's like a non-revenue something or other that came in. $4,200.
But I don't see that, what you handed me.
he's right here, he's on
That's
this.
why I was talking about where did those revenues below local capacity come from, and I was trying to identify which one.
So the prior year adjustment
Somewhere
line,
easy.
that's an accounting thing. So a lot of times what'll happen is, we had a large warrant that didn't get cashed for some reason, then it goes to each department. So that's what that prior year adjustment is. It's either gonna be a negative or a positive depending. The state agency one, I don't know, that would have been a deposit done.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't know either.
So we got we got a state agency collection
And it's actually gone up,
that
from
is
45.50.
So we
That's-
really do need to identify that
45.50, and then also there's an
Yeah.
other there's non-revenues.
state agency collections, probably some kind of grant.
Okay, that came in this year.
Yeah,
Mhm.
2008.
We didn't budget anything in 2019 for it.
No.
Okay.
Yeah,
Would you?
That-
yeah, you
Where?
did, you budgeted $4,200, right, or I'm sorry,
No.
you didn't budget
There's no
anything for
budget,
it.
so I'm wondering if it's some kind of one-time only thing that,
I can go run a detail report if you'd like.
yeah, and it could very easily be, that would move to a different bars code, I don't know.
Yeah,
So
we
I
need to
can't-
find that out.
I don't,
So we'll figure, I can't think of any,
Well, the only thing I can think, if somehow it acts, well, if it is if it's the, salmon recovery board money,
Right.
maybe getting
they got accidentally put
accidentally
down
put in
there.
the wrong
Yeah.
bars code or
I
something.
suppose that's
Yeah.
possible. I know, and I don't think we've had any real involvement in 2018, sometimes in the past, some of the FEMA money and reimbursements kind of circulated around
Right.
before it got landed in the right spot.
Lynn, can you look at a detail report right now, just so we can see what it is?
I can't think of anything that should have been unless it was just a miscode.
And I'm not familiar enough with your
There's
revenue
a,
side, so.
there's a state agency collection, so it's 389.30.
Specific to planning.
Or you wanna add that zero to
$1,000
the.
we can.
Oh, I
comparison
did.
maintenance.
Well,
Did
certainly
you look at
should,
your,
because
that's
this
not
is
me,
money
that's
from
Lynn.
the department.
Yeah.
Did you look at your spreadsheet to see if you were missing the zero too?
I am, it was my fault.
So we're both missing the zero, that makes me feel so much better, cause I'm like, why, I was like, how the heck did I miss that one?
I mean, it's,
What
it's a
was-
stretch.
That was my mess up, not
Well, I
Karen's.
mean, it's interesting because the more
Hey,
money,
no,
or the more
I-
people that you have, the more money you could
I'm
create.
human,
in
no
the
worries, we gotta fix
Who cares about $10,000, come on,
Exactly.
no big deal, right?
And you got a higher level of.
Mhm.
Was I get up through salaries, couldn't I?
Yes, so
So
yeah,
you can
we
get
have
rid
that
of it.
cushions in there. I will, get that all updated for you and send that to you, so you have the most updated numbers. There is. Yeah.
But anyway, I have no idea what that might have been.
It's so weird.
She's gonna look and find out.
I don't believe we billed anything to this.
With the 389 number, to me, that would not be a billing number, so that's why it stands out.
Mhm.
Yeah, cause your billing numbers are gonna be 333s, 334s. So, kinda curious. I don't know either, she's looking.
When we get the money for East Lake Sewer from Public Works and it goes directly in, does it go to a East Lake Sewer line? Or does it come to us and then we pay
It
it
would
out?
go into East Lake directly and it would come in as a 397,
Okay,
cause those are transfer ins and transfers out.
okay.
I honestly have no clue what this would be. We might have found something that you.
Is that, what's the fee for Eastman Sewer?
Well, we bill Public Works, we bill City of Orville, then whatever we've collected all goes into 410, isn't it?
Yes.
Memory serves right, and then, now, but, actually, it was a question I posed the other day, and I don't know if we had a chance to talk about it anymore. In terms of, the rest of it comes out of infrastructure.
Correct.
Does that transfer in to 410, or does everything transfer into infrastructure and pay out?
I believe it transfers into 410
410.
and everything is paid out of 410. Let me look real quick, just so I'm not.
Just a question.
I'm pretty sure it is, cause the 397, 597s I have to balance, but let me
Yeah.
double check. And we don't have a budget set up for it yet. But I believe because, of all the payments and stuff, that they come out of 410, so they're reflected accurately, so everything transfers in and then it gets paid out. And yes, it does transfer in from 117 and 102.
She doesn't see.
For the last year or so now, I don't think we haven't bothered to project any collection, connection fees. Yeah, no way of knowing. I didn't want a number that then threw us off, so, I mean, theoretically, we may have those from Champerty Shores. I mean, we can calculate those out if you want a budget projection, or we can just deal with it if it happens. I mean, that per se doesn't affect my budget remarkably, but it does affect infrastructure.
Well, that helps too.
You know, cause that'll be 19, 20 collection fees, so it's not inconsequential. I don't know if we'll get her done. We may get the fees collected in
So
2019.
monthly deposits being made for approximately $350, looks like it's happening every single month under that line item.
It doesn't say who it's coming, where's it
Just says
coming
Okanogan County Planning on it, so, cause that's how they describe it in Terrascan when it pulls over.
Every month it's the same amount.
It's, yeah,
350 every week.
yeah. Do you want me to?
Every week. Yeah, I was gonna say, you
Oh, it
can't,
looked like a month to me. Is it every 3 weeks?
well, you can't get
Right.
6,000, or can't get 4,500 bucks.
Yeah, well, there was a couple 700 ones, and then there's ins and outs. Do you want me to call and talk to Pam and get a lowdown on what those are for? Cause she can pull one of those receipts and tell us real quick.
Rocky can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't you go figure out what that money is, where it's coming from, if you would please.
Do we need to budget for it or not? Alright,
$350, someone's sending me money?
I don't know.
Cool.
What exactly?
They're
Yeah,
tax
it's just-
receipts.
Really, what are we charging you for?
Now, why is it going in the county budget?
Well,
Wait a
it's
minute.
Right.
It's a non-revenue.
It's a
Okay.
That's the
non-revenue.
other thing that's
So,
kind of,
yeah.
yeah.
What's that?
389 is a non-revenue line. So we really do need to identify
Mhm.
what that
It's
is.
mostly kind of like a holding code is what a 389 is, and a
Mhm.
589, so that's why it stands out a lot, especially with it being weekly deposits. I'm like, ooh,
See, but the number doesn't add up to anything
standing out to
that
me.
makes sense with what we do.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why the state would be sending me regular payments for anything, but,
No, especially smaller things like.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
$350. I mean,
And it's an even amount too. So this is-
well, Rocky will.
Okay, so for right now, the changes that we got in the budget are just taking that planner one to 50%, 25 FTE for now,
And then we added the $6,000 to the revenue side.
right? For the
Right.
search work,
We fixed the zero error.
yep.
Now, which line was that on?
That's on the, repair and maintenance line. It should be 11,800, not the 1,180.
Yes, I should.
So we're just gonna add the 10,620 to it. So it's line number 36.
Now, one thing, I'll bring it up again. I've got a bill from Public Works for the culvert.
You know what?
I got a bill from Public Works, which makes sense, they can't buy the culvert for the
Yeah.
trail, so I've got that. What are we gonna do with the trails? We haven't budgeted money to any appreciable extent for the trails for years. I mean, we can continue that, and just deal with it as things pop up. But you do have trails out there with stuff that will eventually need to be repaired. You know, the Smokejumper, just one good example, the washout, the PUD picked up
Right.
a lot of money on that, and they haven't sent me a bill.
Well, they didn't, they utilized their money properly to make sure that they have
Okay, fair.
access to that.
Fair enough, but,
Well, without the trail, they would've had to do that, wouldn't they?
They,
So
basically what
it's
I'm saying is,
our
they
Department of
fixed something
Ecology
that they
line.
needed to get
Yeah.
fixed, we bought the culvert for it. 'cause
We
it's
created the
trail.
line for
Right.
Department of Ecology
Yeah. that was-
for their, so that way,
Yeah, if-
all year long, we can just.
oh, okay,
Oh.
yeah, all right, fair enough.
Carrie did it too.
Yeah.
But-
Okay, ESB 1691
Uh-huh.
requires us to charge $500 for the wells that go in, 350 goes to the Department of Ecology, that's what that is. So every time we charge that, apparently 350 of it goes into that line.
Because when we pay Department of Ecology, we take it out of that line, hence it's a holding line.
Okay, so let's make sure though that that's set up correctly, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
it
sure it
is.
probably is, but, so revenue in would be in the,
Apparently showing up under state agencies,
No.
or is that, well, he says the holding, so is that
That's
gonna
it.
have to transfer then?
It's not included in our revenue whatsoever.
Well, no, it has to be, because it's a fee that we charge and then and then we send the state part of that fee.
There's no budget on there.
We have 150 goes into our application line, and that 350 that has to go to DOE goes straight into that line.
Well, no, when we pay that bill,
Oh, that's why it's a
Reduces the
revenue. Oh, right.
389 code and then sends it on
So
because
it's a
it's
revenue,
non-expenditure.
it's a $350 revenue in on 389, but then
It's reduced out of 389 and sent out.
okay, so we don't need a
so
corresponding.
we don't,
Okay.
That's the state portion of those.
Right, and that's what should be happening up above.
okay.
I went and talked to the treasurer, so there should be no budget there
Good,
for the same thing,
perfect.
so.
Okay,
All right, very good. So that's all set up and.
My apologies, commissioners, I might have remembered that.
No, that's all right.
I didn't remember it either, and I should
And
have.
so,
Once I
so
pulled up the
then,
notes, but I was like-
but what you budgeted into your fees was the $150 portion relative to how many we think we're gonna have.
Say, and actually, let's talk about our application fees. The 2018 projections had a projection for the water availability, which now we don't do. But we didn't build any projections for the nightly rental licenses, for instance, which now we do. So looking at all of those things, the different well permits that we're still doing in 49, under 1691, we essentially left it kind of the same.
It basically washed out with the different fees. that
So,
were-
and we still need to put in front of the commissioners the fee schedule, to take a look at it, which we try to do with some regularity, the question always being, this is what we think it costs us to process the permit. How much cost recovery do you want to implement? So we'll freshen up those numbers, put that in front of the commissioners, so you can take a look at it.
All right. Would you do me a favor, and I'm not sure if Commissioner Branch wants it or not, but I'm using a working copy that is static. When you get that page fixed, would you just send me that page, and can I then just copy and paste it over top of?
With Excel, doing the copy and pasting, make sure you do a paste special and then tell it formulas and
Mhm.
format, because otherwise you'll lose your formula.
Right.
Other than that, yes. And what page are you talking about?
The planning.
The plan, oh, the expenditure side of the
expenditure
planning.
side,
Okay.
And the revenue, actually.
Because we've got some changes to revenue we need to talk
Yeah.
about too, so.
I don't
I'll be
care.
happy to.
I'd rather the whole budget.
I will send you the whole budget, I will send you the specific,
Or just the
pages and the
specific change,
changes.
even just the specific
Because
changes.
it's not a
Sure.
piece of paper, so I mean.
okay, sure, I can do that, not a problem,
You've got
whatever
all
you
that
want.
data space is
So
better
I'll
than-
send you the whole one, and then Commissioner Hover, I will send you just the pages that have changes.
Mhm.
Okay,
That'd be great.
sure.
So back to trails. I mean, two questions I guess I would pose. One, do you want them to still be administered out of planning department's budget? I just asked that just for the sake of form.
I just transferred.
And do you want a budget?
Yeah, it's,
Any money for maintenance?
Has there been quite a conversation about it, going to public works budget?
Well, it started there, actually.
Right.
Then it came, then it came back to us.
Is that 125?
That's what it was.
Because it came with an employee.
Oh,
It just went to voicemail.
Parks and Trails maintenance.
Thank you for letting me.
Oh, no, that's at the top of your budget,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, and then we actually have this, another question, we have broken out different specific trails. And I don't necessarily have a recommendation for you, just, we have this infrastructure out in the county, and it breaks.
We're talking about the trails, right?
We're talking about the trails.
Okay,
We have
so,
Whistler Canyon, we have Smokejumper, obviously it's two big ticket items. We still have the property there at the end of the Smokejumper, and we haven't done anything with. All beg for some level of maintenance, weed control, something. And occasionally, of course, we have the failures. We can try to extrapolate out a maintenance program and build budget into it, we can just deal with things as they come up. What are the commissioners?
Well, I think first thing, we actually should move it to Public Works. I just don't really think that, you know, it's just the way things unfolded, but I think it should be a Public Works.
Okay, well, let's, be, I kind of agree with you, but at the same time, we have something going on over there that is a little bit different than what you have going on over here. So just to make sure that it fits all the way around,
Yeah.
would be good to, you know, to fit, I mean, thinking
I
of
love a
things-
good fit.
Yeah, think of the things that we're doing with them over there, where they're calling and asking for planning to figure out if we can put a toilet on,
We have different skill sets salted about the county. And, you know, I'm not necessarily even looking for a decision today, cause I mean, kind of hanging over the whole trails question is still the question of, your parks and your Park and Recreation Board, which correct me if I'm wrong, Laney, we figured out that resolution had been adopted for the Park and Rec Board. We found the drafts. Do you remember off the top of your head?
There was a Tenasket Parks and Rec. Is
Well,
what you're-
that was their gig. This was going back, remember we started that research, and I don't know if we ever actually put our heads together. The Fair Advisory Committee was created and populated. The Park and Recreation Board, I thought, was created, but we never populated. I found my draft of the resolution doing all of that stuff, but I guess maybe we need to double check and
I
make
would
sure.
double check, because
Okay.
I think it was formed, the Parks and Rec Board as the fair
Well, that was, yeah,
entity.
say-
It was created under two parts of two different codes.
fair enough. I think we repeat, it's fascinating history. The Park and Rec Board was created, and essentially all they did was run the fairgrounds facility. The previous board repealed that. And so all the Park and Recreation Board members went away. Those which wanted to were put on the newly constituted Fair Advisory Committee, and I know that resolution was adopted, creating that. I guess now as I talk about it, I created a resolution essentially changing the mission of the Park and Recreation Board to deal with trails and that sort of thing. But I guess what I don't know now that I'm talking about is if that was actually adopted. So we'll double check and see if that was adopted. The discussion being that board would assume, albeit it'd be a policy level, well, not necessarily, I guess, but the discussion at times, policy level, oversight of the county's recreation plan, 1, 2, the recreational infrastructure the county owns, the trails, the bits and pieces of trails in the Methow, certainly Whistler Canyon, Smokejumper. There's a little park outside of Winthrop that the county owns, stuff like that.
for me to start from the beginning and have a map that says, okay, these trails, this is the county infrastructure.
Okay. That's,
And then we can
can do
look at
that in
it.
short order.
Yeah, and then we can look at it and go, okay, we got a big long trail here, we got a trailhead here that is all we own, you know, whatever it may be. And then we can start coming up with some idea, because, I mean, like through LTAC, you know, over there, they apply for infrastructure funds or capital improvement funding through LTAC to improve the trails over there, because they can justify how much money it brings in, you know, from out people and lodging. I think we could do that up here.
And there's people making money off of it.
Yeah, and utilize money, you know, from that, and so there's different avenues, but we need to have a plan. We need to know, okay, what do we have, and how are we gonna market it, and how are we to keep it up?
And
And that's fine from the planning standpoint. And they updated the parks to get more money for improvements and those kind of things. But as far as, the maintenance and repair of the system, That's where I was coming from when I was thinking public works.
I know, I think you're right. I think you're right, but see, they take care of all the maintenance and repair over there, and
Right.
so it's,
But it
In
took a
sh-
while to develop that.
no, it did.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, okay, in shifting it to public works, does that mean that, there has to be any change, or is there just is it just?
That, I mean, the way it works now, something happens, and I figure out what it is, and then I call public works. And figure out if they can go do, for instance, we had to do some grading up on the Smokejumper one year. I mean, we gotta pay them, they can't necessarily take that out of the public works funds. But it comes to me, I call them, they go do something, they bill me, I pay them.
So what happens over there?
For the Methow Valley Sports Trail Association, the last time that we participated in a repair that I'm aware of, I think sometimes they just go do stuff. Well, which is fine, under their franchise. Now, the franchise is actually with Public Works, if memory
is.
serves correctly. Because it was kind of decided that that's the fund that owned that property. I don't know that that's actually the case, but that was the decision that was made. Was the Goat Creek Bridge.
Oh, yeah.
And we ended up, that was a tag team, I was involved in a fair amount of it. Methow Valley Sports Trail Association actually do the repairs. I don't believe the county paid anything towards that, we just well, we waived some fees, we did some stuff along those lines, I guess. But the hard dollars, they came down on that particular occasion, and that was a bit of a discussion over who was gonna pay what. I don't know what they might have done in terms of repairs at this point. The whole discussion of the restrooms, of course, is more the question of who's going to do the environmental review and all of that.
Right.
And I haven't heard anything recently on that score.
Yep, so, okay.
So anyway, that, a lot of different pieces in play, I understand that, but I do offer up the suggestion, we put some time aside
We need to, yes.
Where's that?
and talk about how we do.
It's swag, it's down at public works.
At 4.
At 4,
Okay, how much time do you wanna discuss that?
15 minutes.
Okay. So in about 7 minutes or so, we're gonna have to be done, cause we gotta discuss some
Okay.
select stuff. So I think we're,
I do have a follow-up to our conversation this morning.
okay,
Yes.
So I spoke with the treasurer, and this is in regards to the, AOC for the district court judges amounts and how it's going into the budget, or into the system. So basically what happens is the money comes into the current expense, and then at the end of the year, when the treasurer gets the memo to go ahead and move the money, it's actually reduced at expense and moved, so there is no expense. So there shouldn't be a revenue budget there whatsoever.
right.
So the
it shouldn't-
recommendation is to remove the 37,000, she said she didn't know how it got there, so we just need to remove it.
Okay,
I talked with Lori, and her and I feel you probably might want to have, the prosecutor look at that RCW, because, counties are doing it different than we are, and we need an interpretation on match requirements and other things within that RCW that every county seems to do it slightly different.
okay.
And then I did pull off the House bill that it references in the, actual emails that were sent, along with the resolution, and she sent us one of the, how they send it to us on how they, when they state remits it to us for information for whoever you want to have the information.
So is that information that we can have
You can
copies
have
of?
it, yep. So I have in my copy, went ahead and reduced that 37,000 out, because that's a revenue we don't want in there.
Right,
And I will be sending you the updated versions.
Okay.
good.
Well, I'll double check when you freshen up those numbers, make sure there's anything else weird.
Oh, I will, I'll double check. You know, I had a
Well, no,
note here to ask you,
I don't
and
know that you
didn't.
can double check for my weird, that's something I'll probably have to do, so. But we'll,
Yes, I will send you an updated, I will send you the whole updated worksheet, everything, and then we can go from there.
Blowing quickly through the rest of your agenda items, Commissioners. 49, Thursday night, we're having our first meeting. We'll set up a phone-in option. So those visiting, Vanessa and I have been in conversation in terms of what that evening will look like. She has some information to present, which is essentially a follow-up of the meeting on the 3rd that afternoon in OMAC regarding the water supply revision, that ecological benefit and all those sorts of things. The Champerty Shores, come back to that. The question I want to pose is how much you want me to try to steer them, if at all, into this DOE grant or loan program we talked about last week.
I don't know that they,
Or if those things are, well, yeah, at one point to him, I didn't think they'd qualify. Another time listening to them, I thought they might. So I guess I don't know, but.
well, luckily, we got the paperwork in, we moved really fast, to get the paperwork in prior to today. So you could be considered in the grant, or in the funding cycle for the next year.
Okay.
The 3rd, the meeting on the 3rd, it's not on my calendar.
No, I'll send that back out to you. This is the,
It's to
Yeah,
go
which-
over the 6091,
right,
basically,
the
funding.
DOE's having a variety of meetings around the state. This one's in OMAC
On the 3rd,
on the 3rd.
this 3rd.
This 3rd, yeah, it's a Wednesday.
Okay.
Let me send that back out to you.
Do that, would you? It never showed up on our calendar. We should last time.
Now then we have the 18th with Tovar.
Right.
That's the GMA stuff. Lake Management District, we're coming up on the end of the appeal period. I believe the end of next week. No, yeah, Monday. Monday's the end of the appeal period. Nothing's been filed so far. In terms of Tabor's quit claims, Public Works was under the impression that we were doing the signature gathering, so I've gone ahead and he has prepared the quit claim agreements. I have prepared an agenda bill for your review. I'll deliver those to the clerk of the board to docket at your leisure.
Who prepared the deed?
He did. I'm sorry, Mr. Gates.
No.
So I have not routed them to Dave. I don't know that Dave necessarily reviews legal descriptions, but we can.
So who does?
Ted actually has some skill in doing that. I don't have him check on, his
Two
surveyor,
people do it?
his surveyor actually prepared them.
Okay.
So, when I say Tabor,
Right.
under his auspice. So,
Okay. Yeah, I know, I've heard that attorneys say that they don't review the legal descriptions and give a reason. But I've also seen some legal descriptions come through that they didn't, and they were not correct. And they were written by a surveyor.
In whose favor?
Well, they just stumbled. I mean, I've had one surveyor had to go back and resurvey for a short plat. And he used the point of beginning on that original one that he prepared, so it wasn't a recorded, point of beginning. It was the one that was on the short plat that he submitted before. And so there was no existing lines to have a point of beginning from, so.
I don't know if there's any time sensitivity to it.
We usually, when annexations and that, get about 3 people to review them. The same with some of the law offices, they told me that they get 2 or 3 people, and they all look at them, because you get lost. We had a conversation about possibly forcing the issue of changing the number of positions on the SWAC. And I would like, I'm gonna go revisit that with them, and I would like to do that despite their recommendation.
To me, if it's set up properly, I'm not sure how you're not getting a quorum unless, if
unless people just aren't gonna.
Unless people aren't just aren't.
We had a
going.
conversation about, like before, I mean, for a long time, they didn't have agendas,
Mhm.
that kind of.
So what do you want to see as the?
I would like to go up two, because you gotta go two, I think, to make.
9 to.
And, one being recycle,
Okay.
and one being tribal environmental rights. And just call it out, it's their health department.
Is it our health?
No, we don't have, we don't, positions, necessarily, we've had, JJ would come to a meeting on occasion, they're the permitting arm of the landfill. Well, you.
Wait,
but
say,
they have
we're
one
the permitting agency, they pull the CUP
Yeah.
through the county, through my
Yeah.
office, whatever.
And then they have.
Then the different public health permits, they have to get, to actually operate.
So, and then there's another thing in there that has a provision for alternates. And given that they allow a substitute, it's called a substitute. In essence, it's a proxy.
Yeah,
They provide for that, so I don't see the need for the alternate.
I don't either.
The alternate was, I think, provided so that you'd have somebody that was geared up to be on the SWAC, but I just don't see that happening.
Well, again, it's, any committee is made up of either areas or representation or something like that. And if you start all of a sudden changing the representation by, oh, well, somebody went on vacation, so this person that is completely polar opposite of them,
All of a sudden steps in.
all of a sudden steps in and votes for them. No way.
And, you know, I suppose the number of votes that have occurred that, you know, contentious vote is minimal. Really a minimum.
So, I would just, I mean, I'm okay with it because right now they have 9 and 2 alternates.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I just wanna make sure there's provisions for, you know, either calling in to make, there's a reg to it because they have a hard time getting, quorum. Now, do all of the members know that they can have a substitute that's a proxy?
I don't think they've talked too much about it, and also I asked Ben for the bylaws, it says final draft on them from February. I have to find out if that draft was adopted. And there were some things in there that kind of got as well, so another one, let's see if I. Yeah, so miscellaneous, under the miscellaneous section, it talks about staffing, and the chairperson can request additional support to include but not limited to secretarial, technical, legal, and et cetera, for the committee to properly function. But it says, however, any expenditure of funds must be approved by at least one county commissioner. Now, that's something that, doesn't fit really the kind of policy I think that we should have.
No, I don't either.
So I suggest we remove a piece of language. And there was one other that's kind of maybe worth having Dave look at, it's a waiver of rules. Any of the above rules or procedures may be waived by the majority vote of the members present, provided further than that the reason therefore be included in each motion for waiver. And there's a few things in here that I don't think should be willy-nilly waived. Just a thought.
I've never seen that language before in a set of bylaws.
No, especially for a committee. So.
I mean, that's general parliamentary procedure. Any group can move to waive their rules to do something that the rules wouldn't otherwise allow them to do, but you don't generally see that in like a bylaws document or something for an agency of that sort.
Yeah.
That's just kind of a general parliamentary thing.
It's a committee of the county commissioners, basically, and I just think that the rules shouldn't be able to be easily waived. They may be procedural in one way or the other, but, you know, like, for instance, the majority vote. Well, we'll waive the majority
Well,
vote.
no, that's it, but usually when you see something like that, like cities, for instance, oftentimes have a more rigid adoption process for ordinance. First reading, second reading, third reading and adoption, you might move to waive your rules to allow, third reading on the same night as first and second reading or something like that. You see that under emergencies or something along those lines. That's generally the only time you see it.
So, would you bring these up? But I would like to know, because I don't feel good about dictating.
I don't
things.
either, but,
And-
but this is something that we have to deal with, not them. I mean, from my perspective, it's something that, we're dealing with the outside world, and they don't have to deal with that. We're dealing with, one, requesting for representation on the SWAC. Number two, making sure that there's representation on our part. I think that's our position, to do that. To make sure that that happens.
So, yeah, it would be my opinion that if I were to go into that meeting, I would say, okay, if we move this to an 11-person board and each person has a proxy that can come in, do we feel that we can get a quorum?
Yeah, what you're saying is that, I'm not gonna walk in the door and dictate to them. I've worked with this group of people
But
for,
I didn't think
know
you
how
were,
many years.
but when you're asking me, hey, I wanna go in and talk about this, I wanna make sure that, okay, we're gonna talk about it, we're gonna say, this is kind of what we're thinking.
So eventually, you know, like we do with the fair, there's something that we make a decision.
Yep.
And we go, well, we don't, not everybody likes it, but we decided we need to do this. And I hope we get there. Because it could be back and forth for a long time, if they could go in.
Well, yeah, no, and I kind of, I mean,
Because if it's an issue with quorum, and really the conversation about the proxy is really an important one. And I'm fine with going and saying, not going and saying, we just moved to do this, and, there you go. But I would like to lead into a little more of a, affirmative action in terms of.
and what would be the reasoning for having the environmental health?
Environmental trust.
Trust?
Because then we have a little bit more of I guess, control over, who's being represented from the tribes. And so if we have additional representation from that, we actually go, okay, well, we could use this part of it. We use, environmental trust who deals with, solid waste issues anyway. I mean, they deal with them from their environmental standpoint.
So who would you be the two positions, the environmental trust, and what would be the other?
That would be recycling.
So what was,
There is a recycling industry position on the board, or on the committee.
because, who just got,
Yeah.
Cushman,
Cushman.
Betsy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe there's already one recycling industry position there. And I can only think that she filled that.
Okay, so you would
That would
see
give two, because that would give, and you know, hopefully it would be filled, but there's a lot of people that keep coming in and wanting recycling to happen, and they have for a lot of years. And Green Okanogan was at the table for a while, and they weren't invited to be on the board or the committee. That's, you know, in the Okanogan Valley, and they run a recycling facility, volunteer and up in Tenasket. And so they didn't stay. I proposed to do this back when I was on the committee, and it just got kind of dropped off the table. And I was suggesting that someone from recycling be in that position.
So, I mean, I would be okay with it as long as it's let in with a little bit of genteelism and,
I'm not like that.
I know you're
Just
not,
walk
I
in there
just,
and tell
I
them,
am going to,
You guys need to